What's up, guys? Welcome to the Broken Saint podcast. Definitely super excited, guys. I'm here for the first episode of this podcast that we're starting. Like I said, you guys already saw the intro video to the podcast. You guys kind of know what the podcast is going to be about. And well, today we have the freaking blessing to be with my brother John. He is my first guest, so I'm definitely excited to have him here on the podcast today. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, John? Tell me a little about yourself. Tell the audience who you are and what you're doing here today.
All right. So, what's up? My name is John. I am currently a college student at UTRGV, going for engineering. Super fun. Yeah. I currently work at Chick-fil-A. Just kind of chilling out there. Been there about 5-6 months. Enjoying it. It's actually where I met Tony, so been a blessing being able to work with this guy for as long as I have. Look forward to it, and right now we're going to be talking about community.
Yeah, definitely. So today's episode, I definitely want to, I guess I wanted to sit down with you in particular. Obviously, we discussed, prior to today about what it is that we can talk about, what would be a good, topic, that you can elaborate on. Because the whole point of the podcast was to bring people who I feel like can relate and bring some form of, value to this specific topic. And so, today we're going to be talking about the importance of community. And so I kind of wanted to first, start off with a basic question on, what you think are some misconceptions about, what people think when it comes to community.
Yeah, so I think for me, at least something that I can relate to as well, because I had this misconception as well. When I first moved out specifically, it was intense. But there's a common misconception on community where we like to tie it into what we see in movies and TV shows, because they portray these types of friendships and relationships and stuff as these super easy breezy, everything's all happy, and then when it's not, everything just works out okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just instant. It's already there, And I think that's what, especially nowadays, people with how much time we spend on our screens, we like to assume that this fantasy will somehow fit into reality somehow, at some point,
Yeah.
And I think that's a super huge misconception, because that's just not how it is. It's not always super easy. It's got a lot of hardships and difficulties that come with it,
I feel like a lot of the things that a lot of people don't understand about community is that it requires work. And some of the things that, I guess touching into what it is that you were saying, and, when it's portrayed on TV shows, on movies, it just seems so natural, or it just seems there is this, I guess, what is the word that I'm trying to use? This flow to hey, there's never an interruption. And when there is, the interruption is very minor or, not very long. And then boom, everything resumes back to normal. But the reality that community is actually really not only hard, but I feel like it requires work.
Yeah, definitely. And it's work from both parties, or all parties, I should say. Because if there's only one person putting in the work to kind of invest in other people and to kind of just live life together with other people, and someone else is not reciprocating that, then that's not community. Yeah. That's just a transactional relationship, and that's not. That doesn't have very much value.
How would you define community? What would you say? So the misconception of a community would be something that is effortless, that is always flowing, and when there's any form of interruption to the relationship among the group of people, that everything resumes back to normal without any form of difficulty or challenges.
Okay.
So what do you think is then? How would you define community then?
I would personally define community as a group of people who have some type of commonality, For instance, you and myself are a part of a community of believers, and a group of people with a commonality living life together.
Yeah.
Is how I would define a community.
Awesome, man.
What do you think, man?
Yeah. And I would say the same thing. Obviously, community is based upon the fact that, you have a collective group of people who share similar beliefs or attitudes towards particular things, revolving life in general.
Yeah.
So, but what people don't know about community is the fact that despite the similarities and things, there's still a lot of differences.
Yeah.
You know, only because you and I believe in certain things does not mean that at some point in time in our communal, you know, relationship that we won't, you know, run into some difference that might create some form of conflict, tension, or disagreement, you know, among the parties.
Because even though, like using us as an example, even though we might have a lot of similar beliefs or whatever, like we're still people, and there's always going to be bumps whenever you're dealing with people. Like there's always going to be something where there might be some conflict.
For sure, yeah. You know, any like, you know, when we were talking about the misconceptions, right? Did you have any of these misconceptions before you joined the group of community that you were in?
Yeah, I did. So because growing up, most of my community revolved around my parents and who they knew, and consequently their kids. So that was my community, you know? And so when I first moved out, which was a year ago, I was hit like just a truck, boom, because I had to establish my own community instead of having one that my parents facilitated for me.
I see.
And so that's when I kind of had to come to grips really, really quickly. Initially, it was with my community at church.
Yeah.
Small plug, Storehouse Community Church. What's up?
There you go.
But that's where I was initially, and it was not as easy, you know, because you have to build those relationships, and so that would be like kind of mine. Yeah, and like using the Chick-fil-A one as an example, it was the same kind of thing. Like we connected really well, like off the bat.
Yeah.
But
you notice that not everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Not everybody connects the same, or you connect on different things, you know. So it's definitely pretty tough sometimes.
I think that's what makes community, has the potential of making community so fruitful and like so beautiful at the same time, because I feel like community needs to be based and founded on a higher ground than just basic interest, you know, but rather something that is rooted on how it is that we respond or how it is that we perceive life. That when you come up, because there's going to be very different, you know, differences in personalities. Like I said, I know we have a couple of friends in the community that we are a part of that are completely different than we are. You know, we're out there, we're extra, we you know, we like to put ourselves out there. The way we just communicate, we're just very loud people. But like the rest of the group, some of them are not only introverted, but they're more reserved, but yet they're part of our community. And so despite that difference in relationship, we still relationalize with them. And I think that's the hard part about it, right? Would be the fact of finding a way to relationalize with somebody who's not like you.
And I think those bear the best fruit, in my opinion, when it's someone who is different and you're still intentionally growing that, you know?
Yeah.
I think that, for me at least, I've seen it in myself. Like when I have certain people that I'm talking with and hanging out and being a part of community with, and we're super different. Like once we get on that page of just kind of being with each other, you know, like it's a much different thing than being on the same page as someone that we're like the same thinking, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I think, develops those relationships that end up lasting, you know, throughout life. So yeah, awesome. What would you say are some of the challenges about being a part of a community of people? What would you say are some of the challenges? What would you tell a person who's looking into wanting to be in a community? What challenges they could look forward to, or they can expect
to look forward to? I like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just expect the good and not get the bad.
Definitely, of course.
So expect it.
I would say that I think one of the hardest challenges of community is starting it. You know, becoming a part of one, or kind of looking for one. That process, I think, is the hardest part, because when it comes to new people, I personally I find it hard to open up sometimes. You know, because it's not super easy to just trust someone with stuff like personal things or whatever.
For sure.
And I think Andy Mineo is someone who I like to quote on this, who he said something that really impacted my thinking on this. He said, let me get it exactly. Vulnerability actually does the exact opposite of what we think it's going to do. Instead of pushing people away, it ends up making people draw closer and going, me too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that is what makes it so hard, is because like naturally we just automatically think that when we open up, people are going to be like, what?
Judges,
like, how dare you? Like, you're going through what?
Yeah.
And like, it's not like that at all.
At all. Like, I feel like there's like a form of reciprocation and I guess empathy to and compassion, because but that's just, and it's so crazy how the beginning of I guess how when we were created is the fact that God meant to establish community, and how how sin, and so that now that staining of this insecurity that I have now leads us to hide from one another, right? And so so community, part of God's grand design for his creation, but because of sin and the insecurity that then is I guess present because of it, leads us away from that design rather than towards that design. And I feel like fear is definitely one of the reasons, or just the feeling of being rejected. Yeah,
definitely. And you can look at that perfectly in the garden with Adam and Eve and God, with that perfect harmony before everything went down. They were naked and in their most vulnerable state, and in communion with each other and God at the same time. And then as soon as that split happened, when sin came into it, there was, I think the exact word was ashamed. They felt ashamed and wanted to hide themselves. So I think that, and along with especially that fear of rejection, because why were they ashamed? Because they knew and didn't want to be rejected.
They didn't want to be. I definitely think I didn't Wendy knew, because again, I feel that a part of that recognition is understanding that, guess what, you are broken. And you have to, and I feel like community is established in trust, but trust comes in vulnerability. You can never establish genuine, fundamental trust unless you are vulnerable. And you expose yourself to other people, because the more you close yourself off from vulnerability, the less you will be known. And community is all about being known. I think so, right? How do you think people can overcome the challenges that might come with community? And in this case, we talked about rejection. We talked about, the fear of judgment. We talked about the insecurities of, what we've been through or what we're going through. How do you think people can overcome these things?
Well, I think that there's a few that come to mind. And one of those is coming to grips with the fact that you are broken, and everybody is, it's not just you. Everyone is in I wouldn't say the same boat, but in a very, very similar boat. And when you understand that you aren't the only one going through stuff or has been through stuff, I think that is where it starts. Because it's really hard to open up whenever you are only giving off, because I would say people have two sides of themselves. It's what they show other people, and then who they actually are,
For sure.
And so I think that sometimes we get lost in thinking that who other people portray themselves to be is actually who they are, because I think that we put up a mask sometimes, and so the reality of the person is where the trust comes in, when you see that. And we don't like to take down that mask.
For sure.
And so just understanding everyone has their own brokenness, and you just have to go into it, It's I use this analogy with some of my friends back in middle school, where just the whole oh my god, this girl's so cute, I don't know if I should talk to her. It's just go do it, and then it would go fine, But it's the starting of it that's hard. So I think just doing it is it's just an easy way.
I guess just placing yourself in a position of uncomfortability. Obviously you cannot expect to want to be a part of a group of people if you've never exposed yourself to a group of people. You know what I mean? It's you can never you can use that analogy, that example with anything, that you want to do, that you want to be a part of. Don't expect to have that if you're not putting yourself in a position to at least be exposed to that, because imagine a person who's I want to be a part of a community, I feel alone, but you do nothing to place yourself, even in the midst of people, but rather you have a tendency to self-isolate. You have a tendency to just want to be by yourself, to limit your relationship or your interactions, and that might come as a simple short conversations. You can't hold a conversation for more than 2 minutes. And people sometimes do that not because they can't elaborate on, but because of a fear of knowing where that might lead. And the whole point of a podcast is for us to be able to dig deep into these conversations, is for us to be able to expand a simple question like, hey, what do you think about community? Oh yeah, man, I think community is great too. Like, yo, no, like, what do you really think about community? To where then it allows us to open, ourselves a little bit more to get to know one another,
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah. What do you think, what values do you think are essential to community and why?
I think we've hit on a few of the big ones, like trust and vulnerability are huge. Because if you're using the example I used earlier, if you're in a group of people, like in a community where you're not being real with each other and you're just kind of giving off that mask of making everyone think that you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Or everything's fine or whatever, I think that like that will hinder any chance of community because no one's open and no one is real.
Like, I was going to ask you, like, what led you, because obviously you're a part of a community of people right now, right, at Storehouse.
Yeah.
What values that they manifest or that characterizes them as a community of people that led you to say, I want to be a part of that community?
They showed that they cared. Yeah. Like, I would talk to people and they would be genuinely interested in what I had to say, like what was going on, like how I was doing.
Yeah.
And they would ask those kind of questions and they would keep up with me. Like they'd ask me like, hey, like they'd keep in touch. Like, how are you doing, man? And I think that's what initially attracted me to this community at Storehouse is because there were a few people specifically at the beginning who just showed how much they cared.
Yeah. And I feel like one of the biggest values in community is being able to say, my group of people shows sacrifice. Because at the end of the day, like those phone calls, that keeping in touch, that persistence and wanting to continue the conversation with you, that takes time.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes people will only sacrifice as long as it does not cost them something. Or they're only willing to give as long as it's not going to be costly to them.
Well, I would say at that point it's not even sacrifice really. Yeah. Because sacrifice is when you give something up for the sake of something else.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something else has like it kind of obviously sometimes we have a tendency to want to, attach sacrifice to my self-gain, but rather sacrifice is a self-loss. Like you lose something.
Yeah.
And not expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
You get me? So, because at the end of the day, like you said, it becomes a transaction.
Yeah.
So we have a community that's not looking to sacrifice, but rather willing to give as long as it can receive. Then at that point, it becomes a selfish interest in why it is that I want to relationalize with you.
It's more of a consumer, you could say. Consumer,
yeah. I love that term actually that you use. That. Yeah, it becomes a consumer, and you become a product rather than a person.
It's like that mentality in that quote unquote community would be like, what can I get out of this and for how long? And then when it stops, it's pretty instant dip.
Yeah, like instant. Like you can literally see the legitimacy or the superficiality of the relationship by, how quick something fades away and how it does not ever come back. Like if it just, vanished at like just that quick, like let's say a relationship that you had, you guys got into a disagreement and that disagreement said, you know what, it's time. And then there was no like attempt for any reconciliation. You can tell that your friendship or your relationship was superficial.
Yeah, there wasn't much value in it.
Yeah, and it's funny because back then, man, like despite having like deep and intimate conversations here and there, I noticed that the things that would bring us together would be other things,
food,
other like things in this case, like whether it be partying, whether it be gaming, whether it be a certain game, like it literally had to be an interest that you and I both had, and if we can't capitalize on that same interest, then our relationship really doesn't like that really sucked, like the fact that wow, like I can't really talk to this person because the only thing that connected us together was drinking.
Okay.
You get me?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can also be like, that can also show you these, you know, how superficial and how unrooted your relationship ever was, you know? Because the crazy thing about community is that, again, based upon a foundational belief, but nonetheless, there is so many differences. And there is not a lot, like, there is more differences than there is similarities sometimes.
Yeah.
And then your ability to be able to still connect shows how authentic that can be. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say, and that's where like the sacrifice comes in, you know, when there's those disagreements or those maybe conflicts or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And then there's that still intentional pursuit. I think that's where the fruit of like a good relationship comes in, you know?
100%. Shout out to my friend Jonas who says 100%. My wife hates it when I say it.
100%.
100%. She hates it 100%. But yeah, I was also gonna ask you, man, like, so after talking about, you know, what some misconceptions about community are, some challenges, you know, what some things that we can do to be able to, I guess, embrace those challenges and move through them. And as well, like this question right here is like, what do you believe are some red flags when it comes to being a part of a community of people? Some things to avoid or be aware of. Like, how can I know whether or not if I'm a part of the right group of people?
Yeah. For me, one of my biggest red flags that I look out for all the time, because this will really throw me off, is when someone can't read a serious situation. You know, so if you're in a moment where you are opening up to somebody about what's going on in your life, you know, or asking like questions where you need some help, you know, or there's some type of serious conversation taking place, and they will like blinded to it, they just kind of laugh or they'll joke. Specifically, what I've encountered is when they'll like belittle the situation or like make fun of you because of the situation rather than take it seriously.
Yeah,
you know, and I think that is a super huge red flag. Because like that's not, first of all, that's not good for you.
Yeah.
You know, if you're just going to be like probed at for what you have going on.
For sure. And I feel like sometimes, I think there's definitely a difference, and I think it's important for us to be able to distinguish, you know, both circumstances, like an individual who is genuinely, I guess, not aware and I guess trying to lighten the mood, or there's another person who is completely oblivious and who like can not care any less. So their way to respond to the situation of saying, hey, I want to be intimate right now, like I want to be serious, I want to talk like on a serious matter, avoids it by making a joke out of it. And I feel like you're right. I think that definitely is a red flag, because it tells you that this person doesn't really want to cross the line from, hey, this is my brokenness and this is who you see, like I want to let you into my brokenness. And they're like, hey, you know what? I'd rather not, like, you know, I'd rather not be involved in that. I'd rather not really get to know that part of you. And I feel like that just tells you the level of relationship in which that, you know, somebody wants. So if you have a group of people who literally avoid addressing any issues, like I feel like one of the red flags that I see is people who are not willing to confront you about something that you're doing wrong. People who literally know and that you know that you're in the wrong but never address it.
Just yes men.
Yeah, just yes men. Like exactly. Like people who literally are willing to avoid communicating to you a necessity, you know, in your personhood for the simplicity of just not wanting to have any confrontation with you, not wanting to say, I'm no one to tell you anything in your life. Like, you know, that those cliches that you say, hey, like, it's your life, you can do what you want with it. Like, that's ultimately true. But I mean, if that's going to be your mentality in a relationship, then I feel like definitely don't even bother with that person, because at the end of the day, it's like they're not really looking out for you. Yeah,
and like that'll show you who the real ones are, you know? Like those who are willing to, I feel like it might be a little bit of a stretch to say put the relationship in jeopardy to bring something up.
Yeah. But for like, the good, I would say, like, you know, and I love that. I actually love the fact that you said, like, people who are willing to risk it for the sake of the fact that, hey, this could potentially make our friendship stronger. Yeah. And sometimes, like, there is those risks that you're going to face because of the fact that we stand on this ultimate thing. And so we use that to help us guide us towards, like, hey, this is where we need to be, this is not where we're at, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes relationships so hard, is because sometimes it's hard to tell when to bring things up.
Yeah.
You know? Because sometimes it is good to let someone kind of walk through things and figure things out. And then other times, like, sometimes people need some input or some encouragement or just someone to know that they're there for them,
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, I think that's kind of like experience.
Yeah, there's like a balance, right?
Yeah.
Like, I agree. What led you to join a community of people? Was it the simple fact that you had to move out, and so you were like, you know what, I'm just gonna like, how did it come about?
So I'm a super, in case you don't know, those of you who don't know, super extroverted person.
Extremely.
So I love people, yes. And I love just being around people. And so it's kind of just natural to me to find people to be around, and it kind of, I guess, goes hand in hand with moving out because I was by myself, I mean, I had my roommate, and shout out to Shmebs. He's a great dude. Love the guy.
He's a great guy.
Yeah. But, like a part of that, not being in a group of people, like I was alone and I was by myself, and I found that I didn't thrive. I didn't flourish. I didn't properly function by myself.
Yeah.
And I like to use the analogy of the Trinity, because God is by himself, like in himself is a self-sufficient being, and even in that, there's 3 parts to it. So it's still a relational, communal, like self-sufficiency, And so like we as like humans created in the image of God should emulate the character and the attributes. And so I think in that, like naturally, everyone kind of just desires some type of community, And for me, I kind of just gravitated towards my church because that's where I was all the time. And now that I'm at work, like I have one at work too. Now I'm still in the same one from church, and that's kind of grown over time. It changes as life does, But it just kind of, I feel like everyone has the different communities where they are, you know.
For sure. Yeah, and that's weird how that might work, right? Like I feel like you're part of like a big community, like where like these individuals, like I guess, are involved in every aspect of your life. That community is a lot smaller community, but then you have a bigger community of people who you relationalize on, general things, and then you have that other community where like people who you basically just like are with on a daily basis, but you don't have that relationship with, so to say, in depth. I guess just to top it off, man. Just finishing up this podcast. What are some of the blessings that come with being a part of a community?
I mean, like as I shared earlier, when I was talking about my community of Storehouse and why I initially went, like one of the biggest blessings that I have found is you have people that care about you, and not just the platonic surface level of just like, hey man, like what's up, like legit will ask you like deep penetrating, like how are these shady aspects of your life going that you've shared, and people who are like that. Not only have they been there for me, but they've helped me to walk through tough spots, like one of my lowest points in my life happened while I was in community with these people at Storehouse, and they walked me through it, man. And that's like they have cared for me and helped me to grow into a better person.
And I feel like that's the difference. Like how a fruitful community from a not fruitful one is the change that comes in your life for the better, And I feel like also the difference between somebody giving you advice and going with you with that advice, like helping you walk through that advice and that counsel, rather than like, hey, these are the instructions, like this is how you're supposed to do this, best of luck, wish you the best. Rather than people's like, hey, you know what, let's walk through this together, and let's go through it. And I feel like that definitely makes a humongous blessing. That makes a humongous difference, and is ultimately the blessing in the fact that we're led in a direction that leads us to live more fruitful lives. And community is a big agent in that, and I feel like that's why God, through Christ, created the church, that His people would not be able to reach or not go in the direction in which it is that God is calling us outside of that community. People,
Yeah, so we wouldn't try to do it alone.
Yeah. And then I mean, obviously we've also seen the what happens when you try to do things alone, and so it's a humongous different, where you are walking with somebody and somebody knows your struggles, somebody knows your battles, and somebody's there with you alongside them, where you yourself are the only one that is aware of it, and then you try to attempt it and then you just find yourself falling back.
Yeah, because you feel like stronger and you feel more secure and more comfortable when you know.
But yeah, man, like honestly, like what would you say, like I guess if we can cap it off, right, with the importance of community, why would you stress for people to go and search or be a part of a community?
I think because ultimately, like that is like being involved in a community will help you to grow, to become a better person. Like having other people around you to support you in life is just gonna help you to get through it, because it's like life's hard, man, and it's hard to go. It's even harder like by yourself, and so I think that anyone like everyone needs a community, because it just makes the struggles that come with life a lot easier, knowing that you have people there to care for you and to help you through it, you know?
Yeah, and it's crazy because I guess there's this misconception that like and this also happens with God, you know, where we believe that only because God promises us that you know a better life in the future does not make it necessarily an easier one.
Yeah.
And the difference is the fact that what makes the situation easier is not the actual, situation, but rather how it is that you go about alleviating the pressure that comes from that situation. And I feel like there's obviously different outlets in which people look for. And I feel at the end of the day, people just want to know that they feel cared for.
Yeah.
There's somebody there along their way, and there's somebody who empathizes with their struggles, their difficulties, and knowing that they're not alone. The last thing that anybody wants to feel is, oh, I'm alone, sort of thing, you know? And so I feel like that should really lead people to be a part of a community, you know? It's the fact that, guess what, guys? Like, life is not designed to be done alone.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, man. I just wanted to say, thank you, for today. Thank you for, taking the time out of your day to be able to be here with me today and discuss, the importance of community. I'm really excited. You never know in the future we might be back, but nonetheless, you never know. I mean, we'll see what's up. We got various episodes coming up. But like I said, I thank you for being a part of this first one, man. Thank you for the time. Thank you for your effort. But yeah, man, I don't know if you want to say anything else to the audience. Any farewells. But if not, so we can just, wrap this podcast up.
No, dude, definitely, of course. I mean, welcome to my crib,
Welcome to the space.
Yeah, I'm always, I'll always love hanging out with you, man. I'm really looking forward to hearing, like, further future episodes, And if I get to come back, cool. That's awesome.
Sure.
But, like, I'm excited, man. Yeah. This is gonna be really cool. And I'm glad you picked this topic, because it's definitely something that I've got to. Yeah. I've gotten my own experience in.
Yeah, the truth experience. And so that's the whole point of the Broken Saint podcast, is to basically bring people on board, talk about related experiences so that y'all can basically share your story, share your challenges, share the practicalities and the things that you've done to be able to help others who are also might be going through some things, or who in the future might go through some things. And, this is meant to help edify and encourage people, and then, lead them in a direction of where, ultimately take them to God, and as well as the fulfillment of their proper design in life, which is, be a part of a community and be a worshiper, I guess, saying less.
All right.
But yeah, guys, honestly, thank you guys for tuning in to the podcast. This was the first episode. Definitely excited for the future. But if you guys have not subscribed to the channel, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, 100% would appreciate it, guys. You don't know the amount of support that would be. If you guys liked it, or if you guys had any comments, anything that really like that stood out to you today's podcast, make sure you commented below. What was your biggest takeaway from today? And lastly, man, if you like it, make sure you smash that like button. I would definitely appreciate it. Trust me, man, it does a difference in the whole YouTube algorithm thing. And but yeah, honestly, guys, thank you for your time. And until next time, peace.
Love you guys.